Kingston, Ontario has the fastest growing public transit ridership in Canada, according to census data. Why and what might other similar cities in this province learn from their success? Let's ask. In Kingston, Ontario, Liz Shell, City Councillor for the Portsmouth District in the City of Kingston. And here in studio, Jeff Casello, Professor of Transportation at the University of Waterloo. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Liz, I'll start with you. How would you characterize transit in Kingston before it expanded its bus service?
I think a major answer would be it was very tired. It wasn't attractive. It didn't have a lot of backing from council. It just, it was there. It was something that people saw go by, but it certainly didn't capture anyone's imagination. And
things changed when the bus service was expanded. Jeff, where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so a colleague and I and others had, we were invited out to Kingston. We had a look at the service, and I think the way Liz describes it is exactly right. It was there. I don't think anyone was attracted. It wasn't working for the city. And so we held a couple of workshops. The city got excited, but I think most importantly, council really gave a strong direction to both the city planners and the transit company itself and said, you know, we need to do better. Let's set some meaningful objectives and let's meet them. So that's what set the ball in motion.
Was there a demand from people in Kingston to have a better service?
You know, I think sometimes people don't know what they don't have until they see the alternative. And so I think, like many mid-sized cities, Kingston was accepting of its transit service. It wasn't anything that people were clamoring for, but at the same time, when improvements came, they recognized.
And Liz, how did the province get involved? Did Kingston get money from the province to make it better?
Eventually, yes. Jeff's absolutely right that there was much more of a political push in the beginning to improve transit starting in 2008. One of our previous councillors was a real go-getter for that. And I've been on council for 8 years, and the first 4 we were pushing. This last 4, it's been a demand of this new young council that were voted in 2014. So we also have in the City of Kingston a 1% infrastructure add to our property tax budget. So it's 20 years, every year we add another 1%. So we've developed a very good, healthy infrastructure amount. So when any opportunity came from the province or the feds to increase our capital investment, we took it. And the transit lately has been booming in terms of capital because of many of these grants. But it's also been that this council has said, take it, do it. We've got to keep improving our transit.
Now, we always seem to hear when things are great, but along the way, I'm sure you probably had barriers to overcome to get to the point that the city is at. What were some of these barriers?
So I think it was 2013 or 14 when new express routes came out, and there were 4 new express routes that were introduced. And you know, that level of investment took a lot of wisdom and a lot of foresight by both the planners and by council. And I'm sure there were many members of the public who were a little bit concerned about the capital outlays and the operating costs that were going to have to go into making these changes. And it was a little bit of, if you build it, they'll come. And the good news is that they have come. But you know, it could have gone very wrong. I mean, there could have been a major investment, and the transit service could still be very underutilized. So this was a bit of a risk, and it was a challenge, and it could have been very bumpy.
And Liz, do you have something to add too? Some of the barriers?
Well, yes, staff were very aware of this, and many of the innovations, well, from the staff side, a big one was to incentivize large institutions to get groups of employees to sign up for regular bus passes. And the more employees that signed up, the less the cost per employee. That has meant that many of our major institutions have an increasing ridership, literally month by month. We created 5 park and rides so that people in the suburbs could park their car, hop on an express bus, and be to work in 5–10 minutes. And this has been hugely successful. The other thing we did on purpose as how to train people to use buses is teenagers and children ride for free. Because the theory is, if you know how to ride a bus, you'll ride it forever.
That's really interesting, training people how to use the bus service. I've never heard of that.
You know, it's funny. It's a real challenge because there is this sort of, well, first there's a social stigma of being on the bus, but there's also this sort of social pressure of getting up, knowing how to pay the fare, you know, where to sit, what the dynamics is with the bus driver, all of that. And anything that you can do to lessen the barrier to encourage people to try this service, these are the things that you have to do. You have to overcome these sort of social and psychological barriers to having people ride transit. And by starting them out in grade 9 with a free transit pass, it's remarkably effective to get people just accustomed and acclimated and comfortable with riding transit.
And also to know that it's something that they can use and it's there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm thinking too that to get this model for Kingston, you probably looked at other cities similar size to get an idea of what to do?
So I'm from the region of Waterloo, and I would say that the region of Waterloo has been pretty progressive as well. They started an express bus service all the way back in 2004. As you know, we're building light rail transit in the region at a size that is probably the smallest city in North America to have light rail transit. So this is really forward thinking, and there are a number of cities that are being successful in this area. I think Hamilton for a long time had been lagging, and now they're really eager to move into light rail transit. So there's evidence of people just being thoughtful about their transit service. I mean, I think if there's one message that the rest of Ontario should be paying attention to Kingston's story is it doesn't take remarkable innovation or earth-shattering change. It is incremental and it is positive and it's reinforcing, and doing the right things can really produce really important results.
And I was reading that Calgary was a city that, you know, when they got LRTs, I think back in the 70s or something.
Yeah, that's when it started.
That's when it started, and people, I think, there was a little bit of pushback, but now it's just something that's always been there.
So Calgary actually has the highest parking prices in the central core outside of Manhattan in North America. So to drive your car downtown in Calgary is really expensive, and it's always been that way. And Calgary's always had this really strong downtown. But absent LRT, Calgary's downtown wouldn't have continued to be that strong, and the city wouldn't have flourished. So it was, again, visionary by the transportation planners and engineers in Calgary. And yeah, there was some public resistance to LRT, especially when you start taking streets away from cars in the downtown to run your transit system. That's always a challenge.
Well, change is difficult, and I'm sure you had to make a lot of changes in Kingston to make it the way it is right now. Liz, can you walk us through some of the changes that you made?
Well, just to carry on from something Jeff said, we did increase the price of parking downtown in the lots, and there was pushback from that. So we really did have to make sure we were working with employers, with our city staff. They did a lot of work on promotion and guiding businesses on why this new system of transit and new system of pricing would be beneficial for them. Because many people, their comment was, I can't get my child to daycare, get downtown to work, and be able to pick up my child and use the bus. But you can if we have 10-minute service, hopefully we're heading to 5-minute service in the very dense areas that have the employers and the daycares. So that was one of the challenges, the price of parking, making it much more attractive to take the bus than take your car, more convenient or as convenient as possible. So we did have to do quite a selling job, and I think staff did a remarkable job on that in persuading people. Well, and as more and more people got used to it, they told each other.
Well, how do you get car drivers to be on your side? Because if you are increasing prices for parking, there's a possibility that, you know, they're being penalized for having access to a car.
So there's always there's always two things. One is that before you increase the price of parking, you have to provide meaningful alternatives. So you can't just say we're raising your price and there's nothing you can do. But if you say we're going to make transit really competitive in this corridor, you can continue to drive if you wish, but we have to recognize that your driving has a societal cost, and it really isn't from a societal perspective, what we want you to do. So we're going to discourage driving by yourself in your car. We're going to raise prices, and we're going to give you a really meaningful alternative. But just one point to what Liz was saying about the outreach. I had a chance to do several public meetings in Kingston, and at those meetings you get everyone who is really just incredibly eager to see the service improve, to someone who is just incredibly displeased with the service and doesn't want to see any more implications on their auto travel. And over time, that model kind of changed. And the most recent one that I did now a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago, it was predominantly people who were saying, what's next? What's the next change? And so I think the communication strategies has really been very good. And just one more point, I think it's top to bottom. I mean, it's the mayor's office, the council, but also when we do these public meetings, the drivers themselves are out, and they're really incredibly eager to talk about the successes that they've seen and that they've been part of. So everybody's believing in the Kingston story. And
not to take away from the Kingston story, but if you're somebody who's living in a different municipality and seeing the great things that are happening in Kingston, critics might say, well, obviously you do have an increased ridership because you're allowing a lot of people to take it for free. How do you respond to that, Liz?
Well, when we worked out the actual cost implications, say for children, we brought it in 1 year at a time. It wasn't just a blanket change. So the cost was absorbed year by year. And as we did the free rides, which weren't totally free, I mean, the school board is paying a small fee to the city for children being able to ride school buses at no cost, or sorry, the city buses at no cost. Again, it was the social benefit made a big impact. Younger people want buses. I mean, you've heard that before about cars, and younger people aren't driving as much. And it is true from what we've found that if people can have a convenient way to get around that doesn't involve being in a vehicle, they'll take it now. And that's part of the slow change. So the budget implication was never big enough that it meant a property tax increase or a service change in some way in another area. So it really didn't cause any kind of upset in terms of budget implications.
There's something else that happens when you make transit free to high school students, for example, the demand increases. And in order to meet the demand, then the service has to be run more frequently. And when the service is run more frequently, it becomes more attractive to those who are paying. And so what Kingston has seen is, yes, there's lots of student ridership, lots of free, but the month-over-month adult sales passes have increased every single year, setting new records. And so it's not just students. The students may be driving the increased frequency, but the paying customers, the adult customers, the people we call choice riders, those who have a choice between auto, cycling, transit, they're also increasing. And so it's really win-win.
And let's talk about the numbers then. Liz, what were ridership numbers now compared to before the bus expansion?
They're nearly double. It's been quite amazing. We're over 6 million rides a year, and it was just over 3 million rides when we started. So it's been a phenomenal growth.
And do you have staff to keep up with the demand?
Yes, I must admit we have wonderful staff at the City of Kingston, and I'm not just saying that because I'm a councillor. Very, very thoughtful, forward-thinking. Now, the hardest thing has been, of course, is to get bus drivers. When you're expanding that quickly, there's been a call out now for a few years. You can, there's a regular set of hiring going on with an emphasis on good driving and customer relations, wanting friendly drivers who will keep that experience of being on the bus, especially for the first time, very, very pleasant.
At the beginning of the show, you said that the Kingston bus service was tired. How do residents see it now?
Very active. I mean, I do get a lot of compliments. And it's very often people saying, oh yeah, I didn't used to take the bus, but gee, it seems like a really good alternative now. It's like it's creeping into the thought process of a lot of people who had never even considered the bus. And now they're hearing enough about it that they're going, oh, maybe we've got something good here that I should try out. So it's really a very big change. And I never get a complaint about, oh, why are those big buses going by with hardly any people on them? That's pleasant to hear.
The model the data that we've seen out of Kingston is what we see in many cities. It's almost equal as you increase the hours of service. That's the measure that we use in the industry. How many hours a year are the buses operating? And the percent increases in hours of operation are almost equal to the percent increases in ridership. So again, if you improve the quality of service, people respond. And the other thing that Kingston did just quickly is they built a brand. And so the express buses are marketed different. They look different. And all of a sudden you can't can't be in Kingston without recognizing that there's a different, higher quality service, and that's part of the updating of the tired system.
And what about tourists, people who come into the city? Are they aware of it?
Yeah, so it's always a little bit more of a challenge with tourists because you're completely unfamiliar with the city, and this whole idea of I don't even ride transit at home. Now I'm in a foreign city, and am I going to ride transit? That's become problematic. But I think as the service gets better, it's only going to attract more riders.
And Liz, what are the benefits of increased transit ridership for mid-sized cities like Kingston?
Oh, so many, especially a city like Kingston that has very large institutions in the heart of the city, and we do have some very heavy rush hours. Our rush half hours, we often call them, but they're busy. We'll have streets, backed up for a kilometer in the mornings. So, of course, the more people we can get coming from the suburbs into the heart of the city, where the hospitals, the universities, corrections, staff college, there are just so many institutions that we benefit from the fewer cars coming into the heart of the city with this ridership. And it allows people to live farther out as well. It used to take you an hour to get from, say, East Kingston into the downtown, so that people on the military base wouldn't even consider a bus. Now they will, because they know they've got reliable service across the Cataract Way, down Montreal Street. It's fast.
Is it express?
And they can, be sure. Yes, that's our newest express route, actually, from the east end of Kingston along Montreal down into the heart of the city.
And Jeff, when you look at mid-sized cities across the province, Mississauga, Waterloo, Hamilton, what is the state of their expansion plans as the region gets bigger?
So it varies. I think Waterloo is obviously growing really quickly. Mississauga is investing in light rail transit. But Mississauga is a little bit different. I heard Hazel McCallion say that Mississauga is one of the most sustainable cities in North America, and the experience I think of many auto drivers in Mississauga would be different than what
I live there. Yep.
You'll know.
Yep.
And the problem is, Nam, that you have to invest before things start to change, because if you allow the market to completely decide, then Mississauga grows out the way that Mississauga has, and then as a transit agency and as a planning community, you're trying to retrofit your city with transit, and that's a really difficult challenge. And so the way that Kingston and others have done it, Hamilton is trying to influence the downtown core, Waterloo region, London is building bus rapid transit. As these cities are trying to get out a little bit ahead of it, and for decades we used to let the land use go where we wanted it to and then try and fit transit to it. And now we're saying we're going to put transit in this corridor and we're going to try and fit the land use around the transit. And it's a very different philosophy. And Kingston has been successful in Waterloo region. When our trains arrive, we'll begin to see how it works. And in other parts of the province, we'll see what the experiment produces.
So what I'm hearing is that it's important to be forward-thinking.
Absolutely.
And Liz, for your city to get this kind of accolade, what does it mean for you to be amongst that group of forward thinkers?
Well, it's been really pleasant. It's as I say, it's a young council. I'm one of the old timers, and it's been truly pleasant to be with a group of people who do believe in a sustainable city, livable, that transit really matters. It just makes life a lot more pleasant to be a politician when you've got people like that around you.
And municipal elections are coming up. I hate to put you on the spot. Are you going to run again?
Actually, I'm not running. I have found someone who's 20 years younger than me. We're very similar in philosophies, and she has already declared, and she's already running, and I've been helping her.
So it must mean a lot for you to leave out on this note then.
It is. It is wonderful. Because being a counselor is not always something you'd call wonderful. But in times like this, yes, it's a very pleasant sensation to be able to congratulate staff and see something that active happening in the city that I care about. Yeah.
And Jeff, is there the same appetite for public transit options in mid-sized cities?
Well, it's going to be a challenge. I think when you go from large cities like Toronto, where public transit is really utilitarian, like the city doesn't function without it. When you get into smaller cities, transit plays more of a balanced role. Yes, it's a little bit utilitarian, but it's also a social service, right? It's meant for those who have mobility challenges, who have financial challenges. And again, I think where the mid-sized cities should be thinking is, in which corridors do we have an opportunity to capture those choice riders? And if you looked at any mid-sized city, in London, and I even think along the 401 corridor, there's Guelph and Milton and these places that are, again, I think lagging a little bit. And if you look carefully at those corridors, which is the work that we did in Kingston, you say these are the corridors where we can be successful, and let's introduce high quality, high visible service, and let's see what the reaction is. It's nearly always positive. And once that begins, then the momentum starts. And so that would be the path forward.
Something you hear about Toronto is making it a more of a walkable, well, it is walkable, but having more cycling lanes.
Yeah.
What about active transportation like bicycling or walking in Kingston, Liz? What does that stand?
Oh, same attitude from this council, that we need to make sure we have more biking infrastructure, which we are building. Walkability is very important. We want linkages. We've put up a trail a couple of years ago in the heart of the city, a really long walking, biking trail. Yes, we're pushing that. On the nodes and corridors, we're also, and this happens when you do something in advance, we have major streets that are near major institutions that have houses. And part of this, now that you have transit, you do have the ability, if you do it properly, to change some of the land use to apartments, because you now have the transportation infrastructure. Let's try and have also the people there. I know Toronto does it with subways, creating nodes where people should live because the subway access is very close. We're not there yet in Kingston, but that's one of the other things that's happening along with this. When you have to intensify, do it where it makes sense along major transportation corridors that have the service that you need.
And we only have a minute left or so, Jeff, so I'll ask you the last question. One of Doug Ford's, the new premier, long-term plans is to build subway lines from Toronto to Pickering and Markham. What does the current administration's interest in building underground transit mean for mid-sized cities like Kingston, Ontario?
Yeah, it's simply not viable, really. I mean, a subway line is probably 400 million a kilometer, something like that. And until you get to incredibly dense volumes of demand, it just doesn't make sense to go underground. There's lots of ways that we can separate transit from cars and give it much higher visibility, again, and much higher quality of service. Waterloo Region's LRT will not have any cars in front of it or behind it. It's got its own lane all the way through its whole 19-kilometer alignment. And that will have the same kind of operating reliability, able to carry similar numbers of passengers. So I'm not sure what the new premier's fascination is with subways. It's certainly something he campaigned on. I don't think it's viable for a place like Kingston or even in Waterloo Region. I think outside of the City of Toronto and maybe some areas in the GTA, it would make sense. But beyond that, it's not viable.
Well, Jeff and Liz, thank you so much for being here to help us understand the great things that are coming out of Kingston, Ontario. And Liz, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is a good news story.
Thanks, Nam.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.